7 signs God is working when you see nothing. There are seasons in the Christian life that no one prepares you for. Seasons where you are still praying, still believing, still showing up, but nothing seems to move. You read scripture, and it feels familiar instead of alive. You worship, yet heaven feels quiet. You ask God for direction, and all you hear is your own breathing. From the outside, everything may look normal, but inside you wonder if God has stepped back, if you missed something, if your faith has stalled in a place you don't know how to leave. This is where many believers quietly begin to panic, not out loud, not in ways anyone else can see, but internally. You start reviewing your prayers, your obedience, your past mistakes. You replay sermons you've heard about faith and favor, and you wonder why none of it seems to apply. Right now, you watch others testify about open doors and answered prayers while your life feels paused, like you've been placed on hold without explanation. And the most unsettling part is not the waiting, it's the silence, the sense that God, who once felt close, now feels distant. But Scripture reveals something that most Christians never fully grasp. God's silence is not inactivity. In many cases, some of His most decisive work happens in moments where there is no visible evidence at all. We are conditioned to look for movement, signs, emotional reassurance, and immediate results. Yet, God often chooses to work beneath the surface, where transformation cannot be rushed, and where faith must stand without applause. When He is quiet, it is not because He has lost interest. It is because He is working at a depth where noise would interfere with the process. There are times when God deliberately removes clarity so that trust can grow, times when He withholds outcomes so that dependence can deepen, not because He is cruel or distant, but because what He is forming in you cannot survive shortcuts. You are not being ignored, you are being shaped, and the shaping almost always feels like nothing is happening. The danger is not that God is doing nothing. The danger is that you may misinterpret this season and abandon it too early. Many believers walk away right before something holy takes root, simply because they assume silence means absence. But if you are still here, still listening, still praying, still longing for God, then something is already happening. You may not see it yet, you may not feel it, but the very tension you are carrying is evidence that God is near, working patiently, intentionally, and faithfully, even when everything in you says otherwise. This message is for the moments when faith feels costly and clarity feels far away. Because when you see nothing, God may be doing more than you can imagine. Number 1, God is quietly removing what you prayed for years ago. There is a kind of loss that doesn't come with chaos. No dramatic collapse, no obvious sin, no clear reason. Things simply begin to slip away. A relationship cools, a door closes, an opportunity fades without a fight, and because it doesn't look like an answer, you assume it's a setback. But many times, this is God responding to prayers you whispered long before you understood their cost. You once asked God to protect you, to lead you, to remove anything that would pull you away from His will. At the time, you imagined blessings being added, not things being taken. Yet Scripture shows us again and again that God often works through subtraction. He removes what limits your future, even when it comforts your present. And when He does, it almost never feels gentle in the moment. It feels confusing. It feels unfair. It feels like God is dismantling something you worked hard to build. What most believers miss is that God rarely removes things suddenly, without first weighing the long-term damage they would cause if left untouched. He sees where a relationship would lead you. He knows how a dream would eventually replace dependence on Him. He understands how an open door today could become a prison tomorrow. So He intervenes quietly, before attachment turns into bondage. This may be one reason the removal feels so painful. You weren't ready till you may notice a gradual release, but God was already thinking several chapters ahead. And when He answers this way, He doesn't always explain Himself. He lets the absence speak late. He lets time reveal what mercy looked like. What feels like loss now often becomes protection in hindsight. If something has been taken from you recently, and you can't understand why, don't rush to assume God has turned against you. Ask instead what He may be preserving. Ask what future He is guarding. Sometimes the clearest sign that God is working is not what He gives, but what He lovingly refuses to let remain. Number 2, your old desires no longer satisfy you. And that's not depression. There is a strange discomfort that settles in when the things that once excited you no longer hold the same power. You try to enjoy what used to energize you, but it feels hollow. You revisit old goals, old environments, old ambitions, and instead of motivation, you feel restless, empty, almost disconnected. And because no one talks about this part of the journey, many believers assume something is wrong with them. But often, this isn't a sign of decline. It's a sign of transition. When God begins a deeper work, one of the first things He does is change your appetite. Not all at once, and not loudly. He simply lets old desires lose their flavor. What once satisfied you no longer fills you. What once drove you no longer defines you. And because the new has not yet been revealed, you're left in an uncomfortable in-between, no longer fulfilled by the old, not yet established in the new. This is not depression. Depression drains hope. This season sharpens longing. You still want purpose. You still want meaning. You still want God. You just can't settle for what once worked. That dissatisfaction is holy. It's evidence that God is expanding your capacity, even before He shows you what will fill it. God often dries up old wells, so you'll stop returning to places that cannot sustain the future He's preparing. If He allowed you to remain comfortable, you would never move forward. So He allows a quiet discontent to grow, not to punish you, but to lead you, to loosen your grip on what no longer fits the person you are becoming. If you feel out of place in spaces you once belonged, don't rush to label it as failure or burnout. It may be growth. God may be calling you forward without yet revealing the destination. And while that uncertainty feels unsettling, it's often proof that He is actively reshaping your heart for something deeper, purer, and far more aligned with His will. Number 3, resistance increases right before breakthrough. There are moments when life becomes strangely heavy for no clear reason. You are not doing anything new, yet pressure rises. Doubt grows louder. Old fears resurface. Spiritual opposition seems to intensify all at once. Your mind feels crowded. Your peace feels fragile. And your faith is suddenly tested in ways it hasn't been before. And because there is no visible progress, you assume something must be wrong. But resistance often increases not because you are off course, but because you are close to something significant. Throughout Scripture, opposition appears most aggressively when God is about to move. The enemy does not waste energy on what is going nowhere. He resists what is about to advance. That pressure you feel may not be punishment. It may be proximity. The confusion, the distractions, the sudden heaviness can be signs that something is shifting beneath the surface, even if you can't see it yet. This is where many believers make a critical mistake. They interpret resistance as a signal to retreat, when in reality it is a call to stand firm. They assume the difficulty means God has withdrawn, when it may actually mean God is about to reveal something new. The battle intensifies because the outcome matters. If nothing were coming, there would be no fight. If your faith were irrelevant, it would not be challenged. But the very fact that you are being pressed suggests that what God is forming in you has weight, purpose, and consequence. Resistance is often the echo of a breakthrough drawing near. But do not let pressure convince you that you are failing. Sometimes it is simply proof that you are advancing, even when every step feels unseen. Number 4, God is teaching you to walk without emotional confirmation. There comes a season when faith stops feeling powerful. Prayer feels ordinary. Worship feels quiet. The emotional reassurance you once experienced is gone. and you are left with obedience that feels almost mechanical. You still believe, but you don't feel inspired. You still trust, but the warmth is missing. And in that absence, you begin to wonder if something has gone wrong. But this is not spiritual decline. This is spiritual maturity. God never intended your faith to survive on feelings alone. Emotions fluctuate. Sensations fade. Experiences change. So there comes a time when God gently removes emotional confirmation, not to punish you but to strengthen you. He teaches you to walk by truth rather than by sensation, by commitment rather than by comfort. This is where faith becomes costly. You pray not because it feels good, but because God is worthy. You obey not because it excites you, but because you trust His character. And in doing so, your faith deepens in ways excitement could never accomplish. Many believers spend their lives chasing spiritual feelings, mistaking emotion for intimacy. But real intimacy is built in consistency, not intensity. God is more interested in forming endurance than producing adrenaline. When He removes feelings, He is not withdrawing Himself. He is inviting you to know Him beyond emotion. If you are walking faithfully without emotional reinforcement, you are not weak. You are being trusted with deeper faith. God is teaching you to stand when there is no applause, no sensation, no immediate reward. And that kind of faith does not collapse when the feelings fade. Number 5, you are being hidden, not delayed. There is a unique kind of pain that comes from being unseen. You are faithful, prepared, willing, yet overlooked. You watch others step into opportunities you prayed for. You see doors opening for people who seem less ready, less committed, less refined, and quietly, a question forms in your heart. Why not me? But being hidden is not the same as being delayed. God often removes visibility before He releases responsibility, not because you are unqualified, but because you are valuable. What He intends to use greatly, He protects carefully. Hidden seasons are not wasted seasons, they are formative ones. This is where character is tested without applause, where obedience is practiced without recognition, where motives are purified in private. Public promotion without private formation eventually collapses. God knows this, so He hides you not to withhold blessing, but to prevent premature exposure. While it feels like nothing is happening, something critical is being built. Humility, resilience, discernment, these are not developed on platforms. They are forged in obscurity. If you feel overlooked right now, resist the urge to self-promote or rush the process. God's timing is not slow. It is precise. When He brings you forward, you will not need to announce yourself. What He has done in secret will speak for itself. And when that moment comes, you will understand that being hidden was never punishment. It was preparation. Number 6, God is answering prayers you forgot you prayed. Some of the most confusing seasons in life are actually delayed answers. You pray years ago for wisdom, growth, discernment, or deeper faith, and then forget the prayer when life moves on. But God does not forget. He answers in layers over time, often in ways that don't resemble what you expected. What feels like difficulty now may be the fulfillment of an old request. You asked to be more patient, and God placed you in situations that stretch you. You asked to trust Him more deeply, and He removed your sense of control. You asked for spiritual maturity, and God allowed challenges that force you to rely on Him instead of your own strength. These answers rarely feel like blessings in the moment. They feel inconvenient, uncomfortable, sometimes even unfair, but they are precise. God is not reacting to your present discomfort. He is responding to your past faith. Many believers assume unanswered prayer means God said no, when in reality He said not yet, and continued working quietly. His answers unfold in seasons, not snapshots. And by the time you recognize what He's done, you realize He was faithful all along. If your current struggle feels strangely specific, ask yourself, whether it connects to something you once asked God to change. You may discover that what you are enduring is not evidence of God's silence, but proof that He listened. Number 7. Your dependence on God is increasing. Even if your confidence isn't, there is a moment in the spiritual journey where self-assurance begins to weaken. You feel less certain of your own strength, less confident in your ability to control outcomes, less convinced that effort alone will carry you forward. And at first, this feels like failure. You wonder why you feel smaller instead of stronger, more cautious instead of bold. But this is often where God does His deepest work. God does not build His kingdom on self-sufficiency. He builds it on dependence, and dependence rarely feels empowering at the beginning. It feels vulnerable. It feels like standing without backup. Yet as your confidence in yourself decreases, your reliance on God increases, and that shift changes everything. You pray more honestly. You may notice more carefully. You cling less to plans and more to presence. You stop assuming you know what's best and begin asking God to lead each step. This kind of faith is not dramatic, but it is durable. It does not collapse when circumstances change because it is anchored in God, not in you. Feeling weak does not mean God is diminishing you. It often means He is repositioning you. When your strength runs out, His begins to carry you. And the life built on that kind of trust is far more stable than anything driven by confidence alone. Conclusion: when you look at your life and feel like nothing is happening, resist the urge to assume God has stopped working. Silence is not absence. Waiting is not wasted time. And weakness is not defeat. Much of God's most faithful work happens quietly, slowly, and out of sight. If things have been removed, it may be protection. If old desires no longer satisfy, it may be growth. If resistance has increased, it may be because something is near. If emotions have faded, it may be because faith is maturing. If you are hidden, it may be preparation. If struggles feel strangely specific, they may be answered prayers. And if you feel less confident but more dependent, it may be the clearest sign of all that God is close. Do not measure God's work by what you can see. Measure it by what is changing within you. He is shaping your character, strengthening your trust, and aligning your heart with His purposes. And even if you cannot trace His hand right now, you can trust His heart. Stay faithful in the unseen season. Stay obedient in the quiet, because when God is ready to reveal what He has been doing, you will realize that this season, this very moment you thought was empty, was full of divine intention all along.